Welcome to our presentation on Women's Institute. In this picture, you see the official crest of the Federated Women's Institutes of Ontario, or FWIO for short. You'll see our colors are blue and gold, and that our motto is for home and country. This book by Linda Ambrose was published in 1966 as a complete history of FWIO. The title is For Home and Country, and Evelyn Peck is going to give us a short history of what FWIO is all about.
When John Hoodless died in 1889 at the age of 14 months, his family was heartbroken. Doctors in Hamilton, Ontario diagnosed that John had died of summer complaint, an intestinal ailment common to young children at that time and caused by drinking impure milk. His mother, Adelaide Hoodless, realized that even as a careful parent and educated person, she was woefully ignorant of basic scientific knowledge. She decided that there must be thousands more like her, and she began to turn her personal tragedy into a public movement. This was the spark for the Women's Institutes of Ontario. Adelaide Hunter Hoodless devoted herself to a new cause, promoting domestic science education. She became a spokesperson for a movement to have women trained in the practical science of running a household by opening a cooking school in Hamilton in 1894. She played an important role in promoting a school for domestic science on the Guelph campus of the Ontario Agricultural College. One of her public presentations was heard by a progressive farmer, Erland Lee, who invited Adelaide to speak at Ladies' Night of the Farmers Institute. This group later evolved into the Federation of Agriculture. Adelaide Hunter Hoodless expressed the idea that women should form a society similar to the Farmers Institute. Erland Lee and his wife Janet were so motivated that they traveled the roads of Salt Fleet Township in February 1897 and used their social and political connections to persuade 101 women to attend a meeting at Squires Hall, Stony Creek, with Adelaide Hunter Hoodless as guest speaker. Adelaide encouraged the women to form an organization of their own to improve their skills in the art of homemaking and childcare. Thus, the first Women's Institute was organized on that day, February the 19th, 1897, at Stony Creek, Ontario. Subsequently, in the Lee home, Janet Lee, with the help of her husband Erland, penned the first constitution of the new society. With a mandate for the betterment of rural women, Women's Institute has since become a worldwide organization.
In this picture, you'll see a volume of the Prince Edward District Tweedsmire book. It's noted as Volume 2. Volume 1 has already gone to the archives. And this is an example of what a Tweedsmire book should look like. They come in all shapes and sizes depending on material available. As early as the mid-1920s, a committee for historical research and current events was established to encourage local members to start compiling scrapbooks to chronicle the history of their local community. By the mid-1930s, Lady Tweedsmire, wife of the Governor General of Canada, suggested that WI branches help keep local history books as the members in England did, where she had been a devoted member. A campaign was launched in 1945 to encourage every WI branch in Ontario to prepare a volume of history about their community for the 1947 50th anniversary celebrations of the Women's Institute movement. A recently widowed Lady Tweedsmire was delighted to approve that these histories should be named after her late husband, and so originated the Tweedsmire Village History Books. Today, WI branches continue to compile Tweedsmire community history collections. Each book reflects the coordinator's style and artistic creativity. While many are still in the homes of the coordinators, others have have been deposited in local archives, museums, and other locations. It has been recognized that the Tweedsmire collections are a very significant resource on the history of Ontario. Many books have been photocopied and microfilmed so that sets are available in local libraries and other depositories. In the 1960s, the Archives of Ontario entered into an agreement with the Department of Agriculture and Food to have Tweedsmire books preserved on microfilm. Copies of microfilm are available at the University of Guelph, and a list can be found on their website under Rural History Resources. The University of Guelph also houses the FWIO archives containing materials relating to the activities at the provincial level. People always ask, what is the Tweedsmire Community History Collection? And this is some of what it is. It's a record of pioneers, natives, and farm history, historical growth and development of a local community, record of buildings, schools, industries, and churches and local government, record of war veterans and other people of interest such as artists and centurions, etc. Its WI branch history and autobiographies of members, its photographs and documents portraying things of interest, and its special community events and human interest stories and lifestyles. Besides the book or books, the collection can contain other documentation of the community, including framed photos, published books on your community, and recordings of members in the community. And here are some of the things that you will find in a Tweedsmire history book. This is an article on the mission of Grape Island, which was established in 1824 by the Methodist Episcopal Church, and was home to about 200 Indigenous men, women, and children for 10 years. This is a picture of the Rednersville Town Band, which was in existence from 1919 until 1929, and it was available with all kinds of celebrations. Here's a picture of the Rednersville parsonage about 1910 when it was occupied by the Reverend and Mrs. Sexsmith. It's still there in the village and is now a private home. This is a picture of the Rose Hall Post Office and General Store. For those of you who do not know where Rose Hall is, it is a small community on Highway 33 between Wellington and Consicon. This is SS number 1 Ameliusburg, which is Huff's Island School, established in 1915 and was used up until about 1967 when the children were transferred to the new, bigger school at Kenty in Ameliusburg, and this building is now used as a community center. This is a picture of the United Canning Factory in Consicon, and along with this picture in the book, there is also a short history of how it was run and who owned it. This is the oldest house in Prince Edward County. It's the Reynolds House in Wellington. It was built by Indians under the direction of Daniel Reynolds, the first white settler in the area, and it is still inhabited in Wellington. This picture is of the Wellington Platoon of the 155th Battalion, Canadian Expeditionary Force, as they prepare to go overseas in World War I. Along with the picture, there is also a list of the names of the men involved and indications by an asterisk of those people who were killed in action and so did not return. Not everything that's in the Tweedsmire books is old. This is a relatively new picture. It's a newspaper account of Brian Price, a local boy from Maysburg who won a gold medal at the 2002 Olympics in Madrid as part of the Canadian 8 rowing team. And the village of Maysburg has a sign outside the village indicating that it's the home of Brian Price. Most of our local branches have write-ups of their history. And along with the history of this Cherry Valley branch is the autobiography of Ethel Brooks, who was a longtime member of the Cherry Valley the Cherry Valley Women's Institute, and a staunch supporter of anything South Marysburg. This is a picture of the McFall home in 1900, the McFall barn, and their sap shanty. This farm is now known as Fingerboard Farms and is still occupied by the McFall family as Mark and his family live here. This is one of our newer pictures. It's an aerial view of the village of Hillier taken in April 1971. There's also an account of daily happenings in a one-room school, of which there were many in Prince Edward County. And you can see their schedule. Hours, 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. One teacher taught all grades. Teachers and pupils kept the fire going to keep warm in winter. Bathrooms were in an outbuilding. And the fountain was a pail with drinking water and a cup shared by all. In 2004, the Federated Women's Institutes of Ontario published Fighting for Home and Country, a compilation of stories by WI members who remember World War II. Some of them were only children at the time, some were members of the forces, and some were war brides. Prince Edward District had 6 members with published stories: Nora Barber from Mountain View, Marjorie Dowling from Hillier, Iris Hawker from Mountain View, Nellie Montgomery from Rednersville, Daisy Wanamaker from Rednersville, and Rosalie Yeager from Mountain View. I've chosen for Nellie's story to be read to you. Nellie was a young bride at the time and a member of the Rednersville Women's Institute, and the story is going to be read to you by her daughter, Margaret Bourgoin, who is also a member of the Rednersville Women's Institute.
When World War II broke out, I was 18 years old, fresh out of Peterborough Normal School, and ready to begin teaching at a little country school in Victoria, Prince Edward County. My sister and I had gone to the Canadian National Exhibition in Toronto for the Labor Day weekend. We awoke the morning of September 3rd, 1939, to the sound of a newsboy on the street below shouting, "England declares war." Canada declared war on Germany on September 10th. Our local regiment, fondly called the Hasty Peas, was one of the first to be mobilized. They left for overseas in December of '39. With Canadian Forces Base Trenton just across the Bay of Quinte, we began to see much more activity in the skies overhead. In 1940, RCAF Mountain View was rapidly constructed in Prince Edward County. This base had 2 school wings, the No. 6 Bombing and Gunnery School and the RCAF Air Armament School. Soon they were churning out navigators, air gunners, and bomb and gun armorers, etc. There were Canadians, Britons, Poles, New Zealanders, and Czechs in training. There was living accommodation for more than 3,000 military people, but that was not sufficient. My parents had a large farmhouse near Mountain View, so they, like many others, rented out a few rooms to married couples that lived off the base. While I was teaching, one of the mothers helped me organize a junior Red Cross society at Victoria School. The children collected tinfoil from cigarette and tea packages. They scoured the fields collecting milkweed pods. We opened the pods and bagged up the silk to be used in down jackets. Several times a year we had paper drives. The children came to school pulling their wagons laden with newspapers. We took a collection at each meeting and sent it to the Red Cross. So in many small ways, we were helping the war effort. In 1942, I married a farmer from the community. We operated a dairy and apple orchard farm, so supplying food was our war work. Eating well was no problem, as we grew a large vegetable garden and all kinds of fruit. Sugar rationing presented a challenge, however, with so much fruit to be canned. I remember canning raspberries with no sugar at all. We used saccharin on fresh fruit and in applesauce, but used it sparingly as too much made a bitter taste. At threshing and silo filling times, we were allowed extra ration coupons to feed the men. We would have to go to City Hall in Belleville to apply for and obtain the extra coupons. I joined the Rednersville Women's Institute in 1942. Our president at that time was Miss Audra Brickman. Audra and her parents operated a small canning factory. After having received a letter from the Canadian Red Cross Society asking the Women's Institutes to make jam for children in Great Britain, the Brickmans offered their factory one day a week to make jam for the Red Cross. A faithful bank of Institute members and other volunteers gathered during the fruit season to make jam. We all helped when we could. The jam was cooked in a large enamel dish pans on coal oil stoves. The Red Cross supplied the directions. No Certo was to be used, just fruit and sugar, weighed out carefully. The jam was made from strawberries, raspberries, red currants, gooseberries, plums, and peaches. A lot of the fruit was donated, but some peaches were purchased. Permits were obtained through the Red Cross to buy the sugar required. Other WI branches in Prince Edward District gave financial assistance for the purchase of sugar and fruit. The jam was packed in 4-pound pails and shipped in crates. The Canadian Red Cross Society supplied the pails and crates. Mr. Brickman would load the crates of jam on a trailer behind his car and deliver them to Burford's Transport in Belleville, who trucked the jam to Toronto without charge. He sometimes brought back several bags of sugar. On one occasion, someone reported Mr. Brickman to the police after seeing him drive through Belleville with several bags of sugar on his trailer. 2 policemen showed up at the Brickman factory to check out the use of the sugar. They were told that all of the jam went overseas for evacuated children living in hostels and wartime nurseries. The policemen left satisfied that it was a legitimate operation. A Canadian Red Cross Society label was put on each pail of jam. The label included Mrs. Brickman's name and address, as she was chair of the War Emergency Committee. She received many letters of thanks and appreciation from evacuee hostels and nurseries in England and Scotland. The Brickmans processed and shipped a total of 8,800 pounds of jam during the war. Honey was also purchased and shipped overseas. During the Second World War, Rednersville WI held many quilting and sewing bees, and the knitters were busy with their needles. The Rednersville WI contributed 151 quilts, 475 pairs of socks, 30 sweaters, 105 pairs of gloves, 52 hospital gowns, and 20 suits of pajamas to the Red Cross. At Christmas time, they packed boxes to send to our local boys overseas. As Institute members, we all did our part to help the war effort. Many cousins and friends were in the services, and most of them returned home safely. My younger brother joined the Army in 1944 and was in training at Camp Bourgoin when the war ended. My husband lost a first cousin. He was in the RCAF and was shot down over the North Sea.
Knowing that the Women's Institutes had contributed a lot to the war effort, the Prince Edward Historical Society asked our district institutes to help with displays at the 75th anniversary of D-Day in Europe. And so I was planning the display, and being a knitter, as was my husband's grandmother, I used the instruction book that my husband's grandmother used to make the socks and mitts during World War II, and followed the instructions for the correct colors, and I made some observers' gloves, fingerless, so that they could handle their equipment better. I knitted a seaman's cap, and I knitted service socks. I had plans to make many other things, but due to the pandemic, the celebration was canceled, and so I quit my efforts.
In 2016-2017, our Prince Edward District Women's Institute partnered with the Hastings District Women's Institute to collect and digitize the local Tweedsmire books. We managed to find many of them. Some were already in archives, some were in closets, some were even stored under the beds of the curators, but we gathered them up, and with a grant from the Parrott Foundation, we were able to build a searchable digital collection. We have 6 WI branches still going strong here in Prince Edward District. They are Cherry Valley, Consicon, Demorestville, Hillier, Mountain View, Wellington, and Rednersville. Each branch supports their own community in many ways, and in combination with the district, commits to many projects for the greater good of the entire county. And one of the ways that we raise money for all this community work that we do is our annual arts and crafts show. We have put on 36 shows, always on the Thursday before the August Civic holiday, and funds raised were for accessible transportation and other community groups. Unfortunately, our 37th show had to be canceled this year due to the pandemic. The first driving ambition behind our art and craft sale was to raise money to bring accessible transportation to Prince Edward County. And finally, in 2013, we were able to do that. In conjunction with the county, we were able to fund a bus that would go around and pick up people by appointment, to deliver them to appointments, to grocery shopping, to all kinds of things. And here we see Peggy and Art Allison arriving at the art and craft sale in our specialized transport. This picture from 2017 shows some of the recipient groups of our presentation tee. They posed with a cutout of Queen Elizabeth, who is a member of WI in the UK and who apparently attends a meeting once a year. They received over $15,000 shared among these groups. We had libraries, We had museums, we had the food bank, the fire department, 4-H, the air cadets, and the bird observatory. And you can see that they're enjoying posing with the Queen, as are the Women's Institute members who were there at that presentation. In addition to our annual donation to deserving groups, every year Prince Edward makes other donations. Every year we donate a $1,000 scholarship to a deserving Prince Edward County student who is going on to higher education. That student does not have to go to school in Prince Edward County as long as they are a resident. They could attend PECI, they could go to school in Belleville. As long as they're a resident of Prince Edward County, they can apply for the scholarship. We also have donated to Reaching for Rainbows, and we have donated to them several times. We have also donated to The Rock, which is the outreach center for Prince Edward County youth, and we have continued to give money to accessible transportation, and here we are donating one of our yearly amounts to council. And in this last picture, there's several of our members at Prince Edward County Hospital delivering our bags for bears, with bears, and they are given to young children and also sometimes to the elderly who need some comfort during their visit in the hospital. We end this presentation with our pledge to continue to support programs that promote better physical and mental health for women and their families, and to encourage women to take active roles in all aspects of community living. The reins for driving a healthy and happy community are in our hands. Make it work.